Thank you so very much, D'Angela. As D'Angela mentioned, my name is Stephen G. Fullwood. I am the co-founder of the Nomadic Archivist Project, a project that focuses on archives for people of African descent. My presentation today focuses on Prince's image, so to speak. So we've got the post, the product, and the panties, expanding Prince's audience with Dirty Mind. I want to thank you, D'Angela, for letting me contribute to this engaging forum. I appreciate you beyond words, really. You do a lot to keep Prince's legacy in heart and in discussion. You are definitely one of the beautiful ones. I want to dedicate this particular presentation to the memory of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and all the Black people murdered at the hands of state-sanctioned violence, recently and historically. So where do we begin? Before Dirty Mind. Maybe 1979, I was 13 years old, living in Toledo, Ohio, and I was a fan of Prince's music. My sisters, 2 and 4 years older than me, had a Prince already. You know, they had the For You Prince and the eponymous Prince. I Want to Be Your Lover was released August 24th, 1979 at the end of the summer, but the song will always feel like summer to me. Do you know what I mean? Right On magazine featured Prince photos, including one of him in concert in a black and white zebra-striped leotard. Do you remember this? This was Prince before Dirty Mind, January 8th, 1980, on NBC's Midnight Special. Don't worry about the music. It just cuts off at that time for copyright issues. So I think what I want to show you next is we're going to go into a little bit about Dirty Mind, but I want to give you guys some context. And I think it's important to think about Prince in context all the time. Sometimes people take him out of context and he's a multi-instrumentalist, he's a genius, but it's all about context when you're thinking about a person. And I want you to bring yourself to this talk too, because as you walk along with me, I'm going to be walking along with you and asking you questions. So 10 points if you know who this is on your left, rocking it out. 10 more points if you know who these people are. So from across the pond on your left, we have Marianne Joan Elliott Sade, AKA Polystyrene, who started performing in 1977, a punk artist in Britain. And on our right, we have Bad Brains. We have those wonderful folks. They started performing in 1976. But I want to bring your attention to another context, and that is disco. Disco was declared dead by some average humanoid, quite possibly racist DJ named Stephen Dow, who was fired from a Chicago radio station that went all disco in the summer of 1979. Remember Disco Demolition or The Day Disco Died? Well, that was the guy behind it. Chicago White Sox promoters had this crazy idea of blowing up disco records. So on a muggy Thursday night doubleheader with the Detroit Tigers, fans could bring a disco record and get in for less than $1. Now, you know they did not only bring disco records. They brought R&B records, they brought soul records, basically anything with a black face on it. Because as we look back, and even then people understood Disco Demolition as a not so subtle attack against Black people, Latinos, and gay people. Now, by contrast, punk music didn't need to be destroyed. Punk destruction is an aesthetic of punk. Live fast and die beautiful and young and tragic, unless you're Iggy Pop. The anti-establishment nature of punk had sharp teeth, whereas disco was content with you dancing till dawn and occasionally doing blow in the bathroom. To me, Prince gives off vibes from both genres. Clearly the man can make you dance, and he strived to distinguish himself as your not average R&B musician. Consider this, Prince is punk aesthetic personified, sans the self-destructive part. He's do-it-yourself, independent, anti-establishment, always changing his look, adopting and often dropping an aesthetic to suit his needs, transcending boundaries in his music and his image. The fact that he strips down, reveals himself, feels very punk, a rude boy indeed. So Dirty Mind is born. Recorded in isolation, Prince told Rolling Stone, nobody knew what was going on, and I became totally engulfed in it. It really felt like me for once. I remember looking at my sister's cassette of Dirty Mind and wondered what I was looking at. I mean, I'd seen Prince before, but this was some kind of new Prince. I was 14, entering high school, wrestling with puberty and with acne. So, like any other high schooler, Prince's music and mythology became my focus. His work became the soundtrack of my high school years. My sisters may have had their Prince, but this freaky little Prince was all mine. Pulse, Prince on Prince. Let's take a look at the very first video, a clipping from the first video from Dirty Mind, which is the title track. And I want you to kind of listen along with me, but also I'm going to do a little narrating. So what you have here, an audience moment, Prince's name on the drum. The next thing opens on Prince, his back to the crowd. I spy with my little eye a white woman in a zebra striped dress with a multi-ethnic audience. Then the band, in the key of Sly and the Family Stone. While studying film, I read that the first images you see on the film or video, that's who that audience is that's who this video or film is targeting. So we got white new wavers and black funketeers. There's Lisa, and we get Prince right up to the mic. Morris Day, in his memoir, On Time, A Princely Life in Funk, remembers when he became Prince's videographer. He said, the camera brought me closer to the action, and the action was all about Prince. Because Prince liked being videotaped, my new job gave me more access to him than I ever had. I could move around as I pleased, and the closer I got to him, the happier he was. Prince loved close-ups. He also loved having his daring dance moves and dramatic guitar gestures filmed so he could study them later. And man, did he study them. He was a perfectionist. He dissected every motion to make sure that it was right. And if it wasn't, he'd rework it until it was. For me, Prince seemed to be acutely aware of his image, his angles and presentation. He was as meticulous and thoughtful about his music as he was about his image. In my mind, Prince knew that Dirty Mind would make or break. And for him, the sonic departure and the visual departure from his previous work set him on a course to mainstream success. I want to play Des Dickerson, a quote from Des Dickerson, talking about how he came into the fold, the Prince fold, but the kind of imagination that Prince not only saw for himself, but also for the band.
Very, very savvy, even at an early age. And he knew he had to differentiate himself and the band in specific ways. And one of the earliest conversations I remember having with him right after I had been, brought into the fold, into the band, was that he wanted everybody in the band to have a distinct image. And that what he was going to do was, in his words, portray pure sexuality.
So, pure sexuality, product. Am I black or white? Am I straight or gay? Yes, I know it's a controversy reference, but hear me out, it's relevant. I want you to consider the racial politics of the 1970s and the early 80s in America. Look at the segregated music charts, the segregated neighborhoods. For those of us in high school at the time, the difference was as stark as a Michael Jackson t-shirt versus a Rush t-shirt. And did I mention that somebody was trying to kill disco, remember? Right. So here's a quote from Prince in an interview he did with Bill Adler for Rolling Stone magazine about himself. I'm going to read a part of it for you. I grew up on the borderline. I had a bunch of white friends and I had a bunch of black friends. I never grew up in any one particular culture. Now, the next lines are interesting to me because I haven't been able to actually work or find out where they came from. The son of a half black father and an Italian mother. And from there, I became, even before this form came together, I was always sort of preoccupied with why someone thought it would be important for Prince to promote himself, or for Warner Brothers to promote him, or both of them. The PR around Prince would be that he was multiracial, that he was specifically biracial, and that liminal space I thought was very interesting to sort of like play with. Why was this important in terms of his mainstream success? That's a question for you. What, with the panties again? But what about the panties? Let me tell you something about the panties. The panties are pivotal. Say it with me. The panties are pivotal. So again, Morris Day in his book On Time has an interesting take on the panties themselves. He says, and I quote, "The presentation was starting to include more of that metrosexual stuff. It wasn't enough for Prince to make sex a central theme in his music. He also wanted to use sex as a visual stimulant in his shows. Like all stars, he wanted the attention on himself. That ain't unusual. But it was unusual as hell when he started to rock long coats with nothing underneath except his undies." It's funny to hear Morris Day write, you know, in my mind go, undies? Undies? What are we talking about, undies? He goes on to say, "That sure as hell got everyone's attention. Provocative songs plus provocative outfits equals notoriety. And Prince was looking to be notorious." I'll say this. I liked those panties, even though as a kid, I remember thinking, why is he almost naked on his album? It kind of scared me. But I did like the idea of almost being naked and still a mystery. You know, I think it works both as an aesthetic and as a stunning PR move for people to remember who you are. If they don't remember the music, they're going to remember how you were dressed. And if you're lucky, they'll remember the music and how you're dressed. About this time, Prince had created Jamie Starr as an engineer, 1981 to 1983, who later became a producer of The Time and Vanity 6. And think about this. This is the first of many pseudonyms to come. What did you think of his underwear? So, what are you thinking about? Think about Dirty Mind. It's been certified gold, and it's been on so many different lists as being this great album and that great album for this year, for the decade, and so forth. I think it's a pivotal moment in Prince's career that really, it was within his grasp, the mainstream success that he craved. My questions for you focus on this. How do your sensibilities, your sound sensibilities, shape your feelings about Dirty Mind now versus the first time you heard it? How does your body feel dancing to the music of Dirty Mind now versus before? And for those of us who were introduced to Prince through Dirty Mind or his earlier work, how does Dirty Mind stand up nearly 40 years come October to his creative output? The commercial release, the concert versions, the unreleased demos, and so forth. I think it stands up pretty well. I think it's an awesome album. I like to play with, sometimes Prince his songs make me think of other songs by Prince. And so I call these sister songs. And of the 8 songs that he released on that album, we've got anthems, we've got party songs, experimental songs, sex songs, lonely, heart-breaking songs. And I'd love to chat with you guys about this if you could kind of hear it sonically or at least, you know, subject-wise. But I feel like Prince started to build this architecture around what he could possibly do from the first album, but that was fully realized on Dirty Mind. Here are some more thoughts. I think, and it's clear, Prince's music is refracted through the listener's own sonic journey. This is something I've tried to emphasize throughout this PowerPoint and throughout this presentation, that listening to Prince doesn't get me any closer to Prince's brain or his motivation. If I had no access to anything about Prince, I'd still be making things up. This is part of the whole mythology I spoke about earlier. Yeah, sometimes I can feel the rusty mattresses springs in the music due to my preoccupation with the album's cover. I hear it there, it's bare, it is unadorned, it's bouncy, there's no mattress. So it feels very somebody somewhere in somebody's garage mattress, mattress springs up against the wall. It feels very black and white, so to speak. Again, this is Prince before his major success, but it was key, I think, in expanding his audience through his visual and his sonic sensibilities. This is before Vanity 6, before the time, 7 years before Paisley Park. And by that time, who knows, dozens or possibly even hundreds of songs that were slated to be commercially released or put in the vault. I don't know about you, but for those of you who have listened to this in the last few days or months or whatever, I like this album more now than I did then, and I loved it then. I feel like there's something touchable about this album that the first two albums I enjoyed, I danced them, but this feels deliberate and fun and a little dangerous. And I like the way that it makes me feel when I hear it. I want to thank you very much for lending me your eyes, your ears, and your time. And there's a list of references that I used to build this particular PowerPoint, as well as links to videos and web pages. And I am done.